Hey, this is David Plotz, CEO of CityCast. I have a favor to ask before we get to today's conversation. We're doing our annual listener survey, and it would really help us out if you took it. And even if you took it last year, we'd be grateful if you took it again, because we can't use last year's data. Please go to citycast.fm/survey to take the survey. It's only 7 minutes long, we know, because we timed it. That's citycast.fm/survey. And when you take the survey, you'll also be eligible to win a $250 Visa gift card and CityCast swag, that great CityCast swag. citycast.fm/survey.
I recently got the chance to stay at the Inn at 500, located in the heart of downtown Boise. With complimentary drinks at check-in and spacious luxe penthouses and suites, it's an ideal spot for celebrations and your visitors. It was the perfect place for me and my husband to sneak away for a little staycation. We loved the cozy fireplace in our room and the balcony with gorgeous views of the city skyline, where we shared coffee in the morning. Ready to plan an unforgettable Boise stay? Book now at innat500.com. Today on CityCast Boise, we're unpacking Trump's executive orders and how they could shake up housing, education, and fire management in our area. Then we mark 10 years since the Add the Words hearing as state lawmakers target same-sex unions. And if you're craving a break, we've got 2 words for you: sledding and puppies. It's Friday, January 31st. I'm Lindsay Van Allen, and this is what Boise's talking about. We made it to Friday once again, and joining me this week is our executive producer, Frankie Barnhill. This was definitely a week, Frankie, so thank you for being here.
Yeah, this week felt like the whole month of January to me. Like, here we are at the end of Jan, and I feel like I aged a full month in 5 days, definitely.
No, it was a week that could have been a year, maybe. Yeah. I don't know.
Maybe.
What is time anymore, honestly? And you know, we've got to jump into this. This is the country and our state, everywhere's kind of been in uproar over an executive order that would have, from President Trump, that would have frozen all federal grants, loans. It was very unclear what this would impact exactly. And that was part of the confusion. That was part of what everyone was confused about. And after this executive order, there was a lawsuit filed by 21 state attorneys general. It was rescinded, but then Trump's press secretary said that the freeze was not rescinded and that the executive order is still in effect. And so we're kind of in this weird purgatory, I guess, of not knowing what this means or how it is going to affect all kinds of things in the state and the country moving forward. And so what was your takeaway from this? Or looking at all of this, how is this potentially going to affect Idaho and affect Boise?
Yeah, totally. And, you know, we don't always talk about national politics on a Friday show because we try to bring in as much local as possible. But this really was the conversation that dominated Boise alongside, of course, all the legislative news this week, too. Yeah, my thought was what a amount of chaos this caused midweek. And we're still, as you said, sorting through it. The Trump administration coming out and saying that now we've rescinded it, but that's even unclear. Basically, you know, this chaos does have trickle-down effects to Idaho and to Boise. And one of the main things I was curious about and was reading as much as I could about is specifically, you know, a topic near and dear to Boiseans, housing. Mm-hmm. You know, one of the things that we actually, Lindsay, you recently learned on our Monday episode with Nikki Hellenkamp, who is the director of Boise's housing and homelessness policy, is how much Boise has recently been able to get a lot of federal grants through a competitive process through HUD to help assuage our incredible housing crisis. And I was thinking about that a lot when this order came down, wondering, oh man, does this mean that any of those grants that, you know, were recently sent about in a press release to us, are any of those paused? What about, you know, longstanding programs that either the city administers or one of the nonprofits or agencies in town that does a lot of this work. How are they reacting to this? And the bottom line sounded like chaotically. Like there were a lot of questions, remain a lot of questions, but were especially a lot of questions when this was still before a federal judge had put a temporary stay on this. And we're waiting on an official decision next week, it sounds like. It created a lot of chaos in Boise around for folks who are involved in the housing policy questions.
Yeah. And I think the thing that maybe some people didn't realize, or, this is a state that went by and large for Trump. Over 60% of the vote was for Trump. And so I heard a lot of messaging of, well, we've got to get rid of waste. Like we've got to cut somewhere. And I think the thing that I really want to emphasize is this is going to affect aspects of our everyday life in Boise. I mean, the Boise airport is awaiting reimbursement for a $2.7 million grant that they got from the federal government for expansions for production. Idaho Power said that if this happens, they're going to have to pause funding for several projects. We live in a very rural state, and so federal grants are what fund a lot of the emergency services throughout the area, and affect, fire trucks, police fleets, things like that. I mean, even though we live in a more urban area, we like to visit rural areas for recreation. And we're all hoping we have access to emergency services in those areas. Things like public education and Head Start programs were suddenly very, very concerned about the amount of funding that they could get. And I thought it was really interesting that Governor Little said that he is all in on President Trump's efforts to rein in federal spending, and then, quote, Idaho is better positioned than any other state to handle changes. Now, this is from the Idaho Statesman article. I just had to laugh a little bit. I mean, as a percentage of state revenue, Idaho's share of federal funding is just shy of 33%, which is quite high. Washington State is 6%. So,
right.
I mean, are we truly positioned for withstanding this well or not feeling major impacts? Idaho Public Schools receive almost 20% of their funding from the federal government. They get about $2,100 per student, and especially very rural districts depend on that money.
I was wondering too, so that was one of the directives that came out from the Trump administration that caused a lot of chaos across the country. There was the other one, which was the memo to all federal employees saying, hey, you got a week to decide if you want to stay. Go ahead and just hit resign and hit send in response to this email. And if you do, then you'll be able to be paid through September. What did you think of this directive, this executive order? Well, it wasn't technically an executive order, was it? It was a memo.
It was unclear. I mean, that's part of it too.
Right.
Is we're working with is this a memo? Is this an executive order?
Yeah.
It's all coming so fast. That's part of the confusion.
We're working through it in live time right now.
What is this and what does it mean? And we're turning to our constitutional scholars. What does any of this mean?
Yep.
I mean, that definitely. National pundits have described how that is a house cleaning effort. Let's get people out and potentially have new people installed. But that also, there are questions about whether he can even ask that or require that. But then Idaho's kind of in the middle when it comes to percentage of employees within the state who are federal employees or who this could have affected. But that's still a large amount of people, between 10 and 25,000 people. And to just have them leave those positions, how would that affect unemployment? How is that going to affect how those programs are run? There are federal programs in this state we rely on, especially people in this state. One of the reasons we love this area is the access to outdoor spaces, to parks,
right,
to, recreational opportunities. And a lot of those, one, receive federal funding or are federal employees because it's federal land. And so how would that, how is that going to affect recreation? How is that going to affect our access to the things that we as Idahoans love about this state? I think the implications and repercussions are just unknown, but potentially very large.
We actually have like real world examples of this, like when there have been federal, when the government shut down because of Congress being at loggerheads about debt limit and all of that. A lot of people in Idaho and a lot of people in Boise are federal workers, and most of these folks are what would be considered like white collar jobs, like good jobs that pay at least $50,000, up to like $120,000. Like, let's just split that in the middle. Let's say like you make $75K in Boise, that's a good paying job. And so what would the ripple effects be if those people all of a sudden resign? Would they be able to find other work right away? Would they stay in Boise? Would they stay in Idaho? What does that mean, as you mentioned, for the brain drain of those agencies? I'm thinking about the National Interagency Fire Center, which is in Boise, the Bureau of Land Management, the Forest Service. Fire's not going away. Fires are getting worse. I know that I'd feel more confident knowing that we have really smart, well-experienced, long-term employees who are in those jobs who've seen fire seasons come and go and can act on the science, act on the best practices. When you think of jobs that are quote unquote secure, it's like federal jobs are some that are like supposedly the most secure. Well, that just got thrown out the window, right? Which we knew, of course, the Trump administration, they're throwing everything out the window. But again, it doesn't seem like we're getting much pushback from Idaho's leadership, Republican leadership in particular, on this idea either.
No, they have definitely bought into this hook, line, and sinker. But we'll see if their tune changes, like you said, during fire season, if we don't have experienced services to manage that. Like it's really easy right now to be like, sure, President Trump, whatever you say, we love this. I wonder what it'll look like in August and September.
Exactly. When a fire is bearing down on Stanley or whatever. Yep.
Oh, it's such a clutch off-season pickup, Dave.
I was worried we'd bring back the same team.
I meant those blackout motorized shades.
Blinds.com made it crazy affordable to replace our old blinds.
Hard to install?
No, it's easy. I installed these and then got some for my mom. She talked to a design consultant for free and scheduled a professional measure and install.
Hall of Fame son.
They're the #1 online retailer of custom window coverings in the world.
Blinds.com is the GOAT.
Shop Blinds.com right now and get up to 45% off select styles, plus a professional measure. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Okay, the other topic I definitely wanted to touch on today is the Idaho House Joint Memorial 1. And this is a little different than the other topic that, other topics we just covered, in that this is Idaho making national news. We aren't looking at the federal government affecting us. We're looking at Idaho's making national news again, and not for flattering reasons. House Joint Memorial 1 comes from Representative Heather Scott, and it is calling on the Supreme Court to, quote, restore the natural definition of marriage, a union of one man, one woman. So it is asking the Supreme Court to throw back the Obergefell decision to the states, or overturn same-sex unions and the idea of that, because Idaho never legalized that. It was federally legalized. So this is asking for control to go back to the states with that. And it's everywhere in the news, even though it doesn't have the weight of a law. It's just like a petition to the Supreme Court. It does set a tone. And Frankie, you've been involved in the news cycle and everything happening here for a while. Do you feel like this is an escalation? Or do you feel like this is kind of a lot of the same thing we've just been seeing year after year after year from the state legislature?
I think it's an escalation. I think it's a step up. I mean, it may be a gradual one, building on what's been going on the last few years, the even further rightward tilt of the legislature, the cementing of the migration from California of right-wing and Christian nationalists, and those people who've certainly elected people in the legislature who reflect their views or even have become directly involved in politics. The House passed this 46-24. Want to note, of course, that means that I think it was 15 Republicans joined the very slim Democratic minority in voting against this. And actually, I don't know this, Lindsay, now that since it's just a memorial, it's not a law, it's not a bill that needs to, become a law. Does it actually go to the Senate now? Is that the next step?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it will go to the Senate for consideration. And if they do decide to take the memorial up and pass it, it would not, but it's a little different in a bill, and then it wouldn't need the governor's signature.
Okay. So
I
that's
believe
the step that gets...
he could if he wanted to, but
Okay.
it doesn't require it because it's not a law. So yes, I do believe this is now heading to the Senate. I haven't heard anything about it being taken up yet, but yes, it is heading to the Senate. And, it is really interesting that this is happening this year because in 2025, we are actually 10 years since the Add the Word hearings in 2015.
Right.
So, I guess I asked about the escalation question because it feels like the world was very different in 2015, where there was actually a hearing to add the words to Idaho code. And what that is the words sexual orientation and gender identity to the state's Human Rights Act. So that would mean you can't be fired for identifying as being part of the LGBTQ community for things like employment, public accommodation, or housing protections.
Right.
And currently you can. You in Idaho can be fired for being gay.
Yeah.
It really is that simple. And so 10 years ago, the legislature was having a hearing about this. Now in 2025, they're passing a memorial or working to pass a memorial to reverse same-sex unions. And so it feels like we're taking steps backwards when it comes to equity and equality.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, just need to point out that although it's true that in Idaho you can be fired for being gay, there are cities, including Boise, of course, that have passed municipal protections to ensure that that doesn't happen, but it's not a statewide law. And yeah, exactly. 10 years ago, I was there during the hearings in 2015 as a freelance reporter and, watch people get arrested. It was a very exciting time. It had been many years that Add the Words advocates were fighting even just to get to that point, and they were allowed public hearings. They took place over several days. It was very emotional testimony. But it was also like a really exciting time that felt like maybe this is the moment. And of course, then it went nowhere. And then the next year, 2016, tried to bring it back. Nope, no progress. 2017, never brought it back, never moved it further than just, a Democrat will introduce it as a personal bill, which means essentially nothing. It has no real weight. It's not going to go anywhere, which actually has already happened this year. It does feel like we've regressed even further. I was thinking about this, though, thinking about protests and those 2015 arrests and protests and also public hearings, what did they accomplish? And it's hard to know exactly, but of course, it certainly solidified a community of people who support each other and are allies and want to fight for civil rights in this area. But I know, you and I talk about sometimes, when is the protest useful? How does it work? And thinking about the days when people would protest about Add the Words. It's not to say that it hasn't happened since or it couldn't happen again, but it does feel like we're in a different phase.
Oh, absolutely. And I think anymore, these protests, at least what it feels like to me, is it is in this state where they're passing anti-trans legislation every session.
Yeah, it's aggressive.
It is. It's targeted, and it does feel like cruelty is the point. And so these are things that affect my family. And so what these protests feel like is when the legislature is the loudest voice in the room and the loudest voice in the state, a lot of times what these protests can be is just seeing that you're not alone. Because it is really easy in this state to feel alone in your school, in your community, in your neighborhood, in your suburb of Boise, if you aren't living in certain neighborhoods. And so it really does feel like you can, it's a visual reminder that you are not alone and that there are other people standing with you. I really think that Add the Words executive director Chelsea Gaona Lincoln just absolutely nailed it when she said in the Idaho Capital Sun article, quote, "I think we all know and can probably agree that we've never gotten the damn thing we need from this building except for each other." And end quote. And that really,
that's powerful,
is such a power. Yeah. Like you said, so powerful that it is. It's remembering that there is a community here that no matter what the legislature does, we are standing together. And if that's what comes from these protests, that is still incredibly powerful.
Yeah, agreed. And to anyone who's feeling alone, you're not. And I hope you reach out to your community if you're feeling like that, and know that there's support. And there definitely is in Boise, for sure. Okay, Lindsay, have you looked at the forecast? Because it looks like it might actually snow in Boise this weekend.
Yes. Yeah. I'm lightly hoping for snow. I don't know how everyone else feels, but something I enjoy every year. I know everyone who listens to this podcast, even just like occasionally, knows I don't necessarily like being cold. I'm not a cold weather girly.
Lindsay, not a cold weather girly. We're going to put
I'm
that on a sticker somewhere.
I'm like a lizard. I'm just trying to keep it together. I'm trying to be warm at every moment. But something that I do really enjoy every year is sledding. That's one activity where I'm like, okay, that's fun. It's nostalgic. It's like you're only cold for a little bit. Come home, have hot cocoa. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
But there hasn't been any snow.
Yeah,
like not enough
dry.
to sled.
Totally.
Which normally I'm not complaining about that, but we're heading into February, so like one sledding day. I'd like one sledding day. So I'm fingers crossed it will snow enough to sled, because I would really like to do that. But if not, then my backup option is, my pick of the week is the Gateway Parks on Eagle Island, or at Eagle Island. They have tubing tracks. Or, I think they call them like sledding tracks, but it's on an inner tube.
Yeah.
And regardless of how much snow we get, they are open. They've got snow. They're manufacturing the snow if the sky's not doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just think I'm planning on that. I want to get out. I want to tube. I want to go sledding. And so that's my plan. If we don't get enough sled snow this weekend, I'm going to be tubing. It's very fun. They have a good track. It's, they provide the tubes, so you don't have to have stuff. Yeah. It's really nice.
Yeah.
They have a little area where you can like walk up that doesn't feel super steep. So you're not like huffing and puffing up the hill and then, sled real quick and then huff and puff up the hill. It's really, it's very user friendly. But it's just really fun. You get to really just like, their track is really slick, so you really get some speed going.
Are you moving fast?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it is quite fun. I really do enjoy it.
Yeah, I've never done this.
What I like to do is they have evening discount tickets or like twilight tickets. And so it's less expensive. It's, anywhere from like $16 to $23 a person. And it's later in the evening, but then they have the lights up. So it's kind of cool. It's like, you see the stars, it's dark out, but you're sledding. I think that's kind of really a fun time to go. That's when I prefer to go. And then come home, get cozy, and have some hot cocoa. And yeah, it's just really fun.
That sounds so nice. I love that.
Frankie, what is your pick of the week?
Well, after everything from this week and the last couple weeks, to be honest, I'm going back to basics. My pick of the week is puppies.
Always solid. That's always a good pick.
Let's go to the basic places we find joy. And for me, it is puppies. Specifically, I want to shout out Freedom Bound Hounds is the name of this small nonprofit in the Treasure Valley that takes in dogs from all around Idaho, but also from other states. Like right now, they're taking in a lot of dogs from Texas. They mostly do foster dog care, basically, where they find a foster family family to help like train up the puppy and make sure that they're, going to be good for whatever family eventually adopts them, gets them used to hopefully potty training, stuff like that. And honestly, like the idea of fostering a puppy right now, I want to so badly. And I already have a dog. She loves other dogs. And so I'm like, maybe is the time to think about adding a little sister or brother to the family. But they have the cutest little pictures on Instagram. They're adorable. There's one right now that looks like actually related to my dog. So I'm very like, I kind of want it. But what's also cool is they're doing next Thursday. They've partnered with Art Source Gallery to do this art show during first Thursday next week. And this coming week includes portraits that first graders in Boise did of dogs. And so it's so cute. It's like double cute. So it's like
so cute.
Babies and puppies together all in one.
Can I ask, because I'm not familiar with this fostering dogs process. How long do you foster a dog for? Like, is this like a
Great
6-month thing, like a couple of years thing? Like how long does that go for?
Usually shorter. I think it depends on the dog and like how much fostering they need, as well as then like how quickly they can find an actual adoptive family. And sometimes the foster family becomes the adoptive family sometimes, But yeah, it's not like it's a forever thing if you don't want it to be, but it could be. So
yeah, maybe a good option if you're like testing that out. Like,
yes.
Well, Frankie, thank you so much. This was an interesting, I would even say weird week.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for joining me to break it down.
You bet. Have a good weekend.
That's all for today here on CityCast Boise. The show is produced by Evelyn Avitia, Frankie Barnhill, and me, Lindsay Van Allen. Blake Hunter writes our Hey Boise newsletter, and our music is by Up Is the Down Is the. If you enjoyed our show today, leave us a review. It does help other people find us. We'll be back on Monday with our first official episode of Capitol Chatter, where we break down what you'll need to know about the legislature next week. You won't want to miss it.